So this is going to be day
Forgot what I wrote.
7 or 8, 10,
It was 10.
15,
10?
20.
I was going to say probably greater than 9. Okay, 10.
If I remember correctly, I think it's 10.
Is that what the calendar says?
Yeah.
Okay, whatever the calendar says. Okay.
And anything we should be talking about before we look at beeps?
No, I didn't have any problems with the beeper or anything like that. I was only able to get 5. I didn't get 6.
No
so.
problem.
And when did you wear it?
I wore the beeper this morning.
And all 5 were collected this morning?
Yes. I guess one of them might have been at like 12. So.
Yeah. I mean, like, all of them were collected today. Like.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. No problem.
So you want to go first
Uh,
or second?
I'll go second.
I'll go first. Number
Okay.
1.
Should I give beep number 1?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So, for context, this was I was just in my apartment building and I was opening up the refrigerator. So, in my experience was the feeling of my fingers rubbing against the refrigerator handle as I opened it. So, I was experiencing the sort of snagging of my skin against the refrigerator, and it was kind of rhythmic. It was like da-da-da. That was sort of the rhythm of the snagging. And I experienced the physical sensation of it as the handle rotating in my hand. And there was also an auditory component where I could hear the snagging.
Okay. And so I'm gathering this is pretty much an entirely sensual experience.
On my
sensory-
hand?
Sensory experience.
Yeah, sensory experience. There's the tactile feeling. There's also the audio. And
Both of those are basically sensory experiences.
yes, right.
Okay. And is it more tactile, more auditory, or pretty much 50-50?
I would actually say it's more auditory. And to an extent, the feeling of the snagging was actually like the actual sensation was kind of like sound. The feeling on my hand was kind of like sound.
So this is mostly a sound experience.
Mostly a sound
Maybe
experience.
almost entirely a sound experience.
In a sense, it's like the feeling supplemented the sound experience.
Okay. And so let's talk about the sound experience. So this is something that you hear,
Mhm.
and what do you hear?
I just hear like a kind of like a rubbery.
Okay. And this is your fingers sliding across the handle, or
It's the palm. My palm. My palm is so like I'm opening the handle, and because of that, the handle is twisting in relation to my hand, relative to my hand.
So sort of like,
Yeah.
I guess this would be fixed, and your hand would rotate around it, something like
Exactly. Yeah. My hand would rotate around it, and because it's rotating, the metal of the refrigerator handle is snagging against my skin.
that. Okay. And you hear that,
Yes.
as in skin noise, skin noise, skin noise?
Yes.
Something like that?
Mm.
And anything in particular about that, or just, I'm just hearing it and that's...
Nothing in particular.
Okay. And so I'm gathering that the handle is fixed to the refrigerator door,
Mm.
and your hand, as the door opens, your hand rotates around it.
Yes.
So your hand isn't actually rotating and the door isn't actually rotating, but the relationship rotates as the door opens.
Right.
And then I feel it, but the feeling of it doesn't seem like it's central or maybe even hardly there at all, but except as the source of the sound. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, yes, I do feel it. The feeling is there, but it's almost like the feeling is itself kind of sound. It's kind of like how, when you're watching a muted TV show, and then there's an earthquake or something, or they show, big stomping, and then the screen shakes, and it's like sound, even though it's visual shaking, you hear it. I don't know if that's a familiar experience to any of you guys, but that's the way it was for me. So the feeling of it on my hand was more so interpreted as sound than it was touch.
Okay. And as sound, is it the same sound that I hear?
I don't know how to separate the two exactly,
Okay.
because, I mean, yes, they're not, it might be a different component, but they're the same. It's not like I'm hearing two different sounds.
Okay. So, in reality, this is what I understand you to be saying, and I want you to tell me if I'm not right. In reality, my skin is being dragged across the thing, but I don't feel so much as my skin dragging as I hear it. Even though I know in the real world that it's a physical,
Yes.
tactile sensation.
Yes. And to make sure I'm 100% clear, even if like I had my ears plugged and I couldn't actually hear anything, I would have still felt like I was hearing the sound.
I think I've got it.
Okay.
Anybody have any other question?
I think so. I don't know what I would ask.
Yeah, I think I'm good.
Oh, actually, wait, sorry. So what is it that you hear, the sound, or what is it?
Okay, so I think I do actually hear like an actual auditory sound.
Okay.
But I also, the feeling of it on my hand is like interpreted as a sound.
Okay.
But together the sound is just like, you know, da da da. It's like kind of a rubbery, snaggy thing that happens 3 times.
And it's 3.
Yes,
specifically.
3. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Number 2?
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay. So for beep number 2, for context, I was on my phone and I was scrolling through like a YouTube comment section. So in my experience was the site of a YouTube comment section, and I was also at that moment wondering if high five was generally spelled HI-5.
And is any of these things more present to you?
The wondering if high five is spelled HI-5.
How much more?
This is probably like 80%.
Okay, so let's start there. Tell me more about this.
Okay, so for context, I had just seen a YouTube comment where
Right.
somebody had said high five and spelled it that way.
Mhm.
And at this moment, that comment wasn't in my experience, but I was left wondering for like a moment if high five was actually spelled HI-5. So I think the image of HI-5 was in my experience. It was still kind of lagging there, like just the image of that collection of letters and characters. And I guess the wondering was sort of manifested as something about that feels wrong. It was kind of like a mental double take almost.
And by mental double take, is it, what do you mean by mental double take?
I was by mental double take I meant I was thinking I was actively kind of keeping the image of HI-5, the characters, alive in my head,
Okay.
because I was trying to figure out why it felt wrong.
And, okay, so, I hear you to be saying image. So is this, I'm seeing letters, or I'm seeing an image of letters? I'm seeing some kind of,
Oh, I'm seeing letters.
okay,
Or I'm seeing characters, I guess.
okay, right, okay. And are these capital, lowercase, is there Like, what
Right.
do you see?
It was a capital H, a lowercase I, a dash, and then a number 5.
And is there anything more to be said about what you see other than these letters? Like, are they a color? Are they a size? Are they?
They were white,
Okay.
but nothing else.
And I understand you to be saying all of these, the seeing of these characters and this, the trying to keep it in your head. The mental process is all part of this wondering.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So is there anything? So out of these two, which is there anything that's more strongly there?
Which two things?
This seeing and this mental process that you described?
You mean the seeing of the characters?
Yeah, or trying to keep it. Is there anything that's stronger? Are they the same? Is there?
I would say that it's difficult for me to separate
Okay.
the two.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry, I don't think I'm fully understanding what you mean by like trying to keep the.
Okay.
So can I suggest that you go back to the wondering? That's the heart of this.
Okay.
You gotta get the heart of it before you get the details, because
Okay.
otherwise you're gonna, A, lose the heart, and B, he doesn't really, the details aren't the most important thing for him. So
Okay.
you make it difficult for yourself.
Okay, so just tell.
The
Can you tell me
wondering.
what? Yeah, wondering is a problematic word.
Okay. So the wondering, really, what I guess a better way of putting that would be something seemed wrong about it, and by that I mean I don't know how to describe that more than just something seemed wrong about it.
Okay.
And so the wondering was recognizing that something seemed wrong about it, and so it was the awareness that something seemed wrong about it combined with sort of, am I missing something, or the wondering is sort of like, it's just an analysis. I'm trying to actively figure out where this feeling of wrong comes from.
Okay, so I guess I'm trying to tease apart here. Is this more of like this is like a recognition, or is this like an analytical thing? I'm cognizing about this, or is it something else? Does that question not make sense?
So I would say the feeling of wrong there was kind of almost an emotional thing. So that wasn't me actively, that wasn't an analytical thing, the feeling of wrong. That was like something that happened to me that I didn't voluntarily produce. I was reacting to the feeling of wrong. But the reaction to the feeling of wrong was analytical. So I was analyzing where this wrongness comes from, what's the cause of it.
Okay. And is there anything more to be said about that?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
So let me make a comment here about why this is a kind of a difficult thing and why you might have avoided it in the first place. Because the heart of it is something which is going to be very difficult, if not impossible, for him to describe,
Mm-hmm.
and very difficult, if not impossible, for you to ask about.
Mm-hmm.
And so both of you would probably be really happy to just ignore this whole thing and go on and talk about something else. But that's what the heart of his experience is, so we can't really afford to do that. So
Right.
we have to wade into those waters. And the waters, I think, are what we would call unsymbolized thinking. This is an example of unsymbolized thinking, sort of a textbook example of unsymbolized thinking. It has a feeling involved, so he's wondering about the feeling, and it's got some imagery involved. He sees high five. But the wondering is an unsymbolized thing, which doesn't have anything really to be said for it other than wondering. So the reason that psychology doesn't know that unsymbolized thinking exists is that it's hard to describe, and it's hard to ask about. And and so everybody says, well, let's just not deal with that. We'll talk about some questionnaire or whatever. So I did have a couple more questions
Yep, go ahead.
about the high five image. So when you started out, you said, I see the comment section.
Right.
And when did you mean by that I see the high five?
No, I mean that I'm also actively like seeing the comment section in real life as well.
Okay.
And it is part of my experience, but also there's an image of high five like in the back of my head, and I don't mean that literally. There wasn't like it didn't feel like it was in the back of my head, but I'm also like imagining this image.
So that's not just zooming in on my phone comment section.
Right, because it wasn't even on my phone at that point.
Okay. And so this holding my image, is this a visual thing? I see it
Yes.
clearly?
I don't see it unclearly, so I guess probably.
Okay. And just HI-5? Not the whole sentence or whatever?
Yeah, it was just HI-5.
And you said it's in your back mind, but that doesn't count. So does it seem like it's anywhere? Does it seem like it's in front of you, in your head, and
If it was somewhere, it would probably be like behind my eyes or something like that. But I'm not sure if that's right or if I'm
okay.
putting that on to
So
it.
if it's not clear to you, I'm happy to just let that go.
Okay.
And then beyond that, what I understand in the unsymbolized thinking nature is, I'm trying to figure out whether that spelling is right.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just what's wrong with this, it's about the spelling. Is that right? It's not that I feel something's wrong, but I'm wondering about the spelling of it. And I'm not putting that on you, I'm asking whether that's right.
I mean, it is technically. I don't know if that was in my experience, though. I don't think the spelling was in my experience at that point. Really, what it was I recognize the sound of high five, but I don't recognize this text. So it wasn't at that point a matter of spelling. It was a matter of how I recognize part of this, but not another part of this. And I think I'm wondering, does that mean? Okay, 1 second. I think that is more accurately where that feeling of wrongness came from. It was I recognized the sound, and this at the moment of the beep, the sound wasn't in my experience of high five, but that's where the feeling of wrongness came from. It was that when I read it, I had recognized the sound of it, but not the text.
So we don't particularly want, or we don't at all want to speculate about where things came from. If you directly observed it to come from that, that's one thing. What I don't want us to do is to say, well, it must have been.
Right.
And so,
I did directly observe that. It wasn't in my experience in that moment, though. At the moment.
so a moment before, slightly before, there was
Yes.
wrongness was a discrepancy between the way it sounded and the way it looked, or something like that.
Yes. And the wrongness was still there at the moment of the beep, but not the cause of the wrongness.
Okay.
Just that it was wrong.
Yes.
And wondering why.
Yes.
I think I'm good.
So again, with the site of the comment section, is there anything more to say about that?
No,
I know that's
not really.
20%, but
Yeah, it was a small part, and yeah, there wasn't really more to say about that.
Okay. So is this a seeing in the real world?
Yes.
Like, okay. Okay.
And it was slightly after the beep that I realized it was the spelling.
So the spelling is, I guess it's more like context.
Yes.
But I guess to clarify that, the main thing is this wondering of, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, then I do.
Number 3?
Beep 3?
Okay, number 3. So, in my experience, so this was in class, and at the moment of the beep, my professor had said, "Frege last time." So those 3 words were in my auditory experience, and also in my visual experience was a little a handout in front of me, and it was me going through the action of flipping the page. Additionally, the idea of, additionally, the act of, or the intention to search for what the professor was talking about in this handout. But what specifically to look for wasn't in my experience. It was just the plan and intention to look for what he was talking about.
Okay. Any particular aspect here more prominent in your experience at the moment?
Most prominent was searching through the handout.
And so is that actually searching or the intention to search?
Okay, let me think about that. It was the intention to search, the plan.
And by intention, or the plan, what we're calling it, but could you say more about how that's present?
Okay, that's present as initiating the process of flipping, and beginning and trying to. Oh, right. It was trying to. It was trying to grasp what the professor was saying, so I could figure out where it would be in the headings. And that was a plan. I wasn't actively looking at the headings yet, but that was what I was planning on doing.
And even what the thing to search for, I took you to be saying, was not there.
Yeah, it wasn't there yet. That was one of the things that I was trying to figure out.
So this is like the start of something, right? A start of a search.
Yes, yeah.
And you said the central part of this, or the heart of this, was, or what you were doing was to flip the page, and then it was to scan the headers or something for the whatever was being talked about.
Right, and I had already begun flipping the page. I hadn't begun scanning the headers, but that was the next step in the process.
And I guess my question is that, at one point I understood you be saying that's sort of that might have been sort of the main thrust of this part of my experience, of that looking for, or about to look for the headers, but I'm not sure if that's correct.
I think that's correct. That was the main thrust of the experience. It was about to look for the headers, combined with trying to figure out what to look for in the headers. Like trying to figure out what the thing is that I need to find.
So can can I make a suggestion here?
Mhm.
So one of the things that's going to be problematic about this beep is that there are some philosophers who would say, well, intention is always there, and the question is whether the intention that a philosopher might talk about is the same thing as an intention that's actually experienced. The intention that the philosophers speak about, I think, is not necessarily or ever actually experienced. So I think you got to be absolutely clear about that. And I think your question there just muddied that water up, whether, because it was, well, you said, well, he was about to start. Well, the about to start leaves the intention as being ambiguously present or not. So I think you've got to ascertain by this intention that he's talking about whether it's directly before the footlights of his consciousness or not.
Mhm.
Because otherwise the philosophers will never believe you.
I'm not quite sure how to ask that without leaning too heavily one direction or the other.
So is this intention something that's directly in front of the footlights of consciousness, or is it just sort of behind the scenes all the way along?
Okay, so I think it was directly in my experience, the plan to do this.
So that's what he said all the way along.
Mhm.
And I think my question was sort of even-handed in the sense I was giving him the opportunity to back away from that. Because I think the audience, at least the philosophically inclined audience, will need to have that opportunity to back away. So now we're pretty sure that it's something that's directly experienced.
Mhm.
And there probably isn't much more to say about that than that, I'm guessing.
Is there anything more to say about that?
I don't think so, not more than what I've already described.
And you had said earlier that maybe visually there's flipping the page that's present.
Yes.
Is that part of this whole thing with the plan to search?
I think so. I'm experiencing that visual thing as like as an aspect of the plan.
Or I guess my question, is it directly apprehended? And then that should have been my first question.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I am. By that you mean is it actually in my experience, my direct experience? Yeah, I think so. It is. It is in my direct experience. The flipping of the page.
And that's, I guess, my question is it best to say, does that feel sort of like a separate thing, like I have this plan and I'm flipping, or does that sort of feel like one thing where?
It does feel like one thing.
Any other questions about that?
So is this flipping the page, is this a seeing thing? Is this a feeling thing? Is this what,
This
an
is
auditory thing?
This is a seeing thing. I'm seeing myself flip the page.
So what do you see? This is in motion or?
Yeah, it's in
frozen?
motion.
Okay.
It's my hand from here to here,
Okay. And is that?
and the page from here to here.
Okay. And is there anything more to be said about that?
I don't think so.
And does that mean that I don't actually feel my hand do it? I see my hand do it?
I might have felt it, but I don't remember feeling it.
So what I've got so far is that there are sort of two things going on in experientially. One is I see the hand flipping, and the other is I'm somehow trying to figure out intentionally what I'm looking for.
Right. Well, and there was also my professor, what the words he had spoken.
Right, well, yeah, good to that.
And the word was, is it FREGA?
FREGE.
G. And how is that present?
That's just present auditorially. So I heard him say "Frega" last time, And I am sort of like actively tapping into those words as like I'm trying to like I'm trying to like grasp onto something in those words to help me find what I need to.
So is that to say it's not like I'm no doubt hearing these words, but there's actually seeing something kind of above and beyond just hearing
Yes.
this.
It's like I'm listening for something I could find in a heading.
And that's directly present to me.
Yes.
Okay. And is there anything else at the moment?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
And then, so this, you said this is a hearing of your professor, is this, is that part, is that aspect, my professor, part of your experience at the moment of the beat? Or is that a fact of the universe, my professor said this?
It's my professor. Yeah, I'm hearing my professor.
And are you, okay,
I'm not necessarily thinking about it as like my professor.
right.
But yeah.
But it's not, my professor is not just, oh, well, that's a fact of the universe, my professor said
Right.
this, and I'm hearing the words,
Mhm.
but that's kind of,
I'm experiencing the words as coming from somebody with a unique identity.
yeah, right, okay. And is, I understood you to be saying that you were listening for the heading, or looking for something to look for in a heading, you were saying?
Mhm.
So, do these words have semantic meaning to you at the time, at the moment of the beep, or are these just, I'm hearing these words, my professor is saying them?
They don't really have semantic meaning to me, because all I'm really doing is looking for a string of words that would might be in a heading. So I'm not really analyzing them for meaning at this point. I'm just sort of listening for like a key vocab term or something that might be in a heading.
Okay. Any questions?
So I want to make sure I understood what that question and its answer were. So Frege doesn't mean a philosopher to you, it doesn't mean a person, it's just something to look for, or do you recognize it as a philosopher's name?
I do recognize it as a philosopher's name, but like the most prominent aspect of the words is not really their semantic meaning. So I guess they do have semantic meaning, but the most prominent aspect of the words as I'm experiencing them is not as their semantic meaning. It's as whether it's as their potential to be a vocab term that would be in a heading.
So that's the ambiguity of the term. The question that you asked, does it have semantic meaning, and he said no. Semantic meaning is a pretty broad term. So from one perspective, it doesn't have semantic meaning, it's just something to look for. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have any semantic meaning at all. Philosopher, and last time was the other lecture that he was talking about. And those terms are meaningful terms to him. Sometimes people see words that don't have any semantic meaning at all, they might as well be in Greek. But that's not this. I don't think. On to number 4?
Okay.
Number 4.
So, at number 4, I was in the same classroom, for context, and in my experience, I was wondering if another class will be held in that room on Mondays. And additionally, there was the image of the time on my phone that was visually in my experience, and it was just the number 11 because it was 11 something. So that was visually in my experience. 11. It's 11 something. And also, I was also wondering if a certain package had gotten delivered at my apartment.
This is your beep, I think, or is it my beep? This is my beep. So, two wonderings and a watching. I see two wonderings.
Yes, there's two wonderings and a watching. I'm guessing the two wonderings happened at different times and they got mushed together, but in this beep, I remember it being two wonderings and a watching.
Okay. And the wonderings, are all these things more or less equal? And the only reason that I care about that is I want to know which ones that I should talk about first.
The wonderings are equal. The watching, or the seeing, is very small.
Okay. So I'm wondering whether a class is going to be held on another Monday.
Mm-hmm.
And are there words involved with this, or pictures involved with this, or can we see a calendar?
The word Monday is involved, but there's no okay. So the word Monday is involved. Yes, the word Monday is involved. I don't know if there's no other words involved.
So no other words but Monday. And do I recognize that Monday means, are there other classes in Monday, or does it mean I'm wondering without words, are there any other classes in here? And then the Monday is a piece of that in here at that time.
Could you explain that distinction?
So what I want to know is, am I somehow thinking the word Monday, and that Monday means to me, are any other classes in here on Monday? Or am I thinking primarily without words, are any other classes in here? And the Monday sort of refines that, or is a piece of it.
Okay, the Monday's a piece of it.
So there's a wondering without words
Mhm.
that then is aimed at a word.
Yes.
Aimed at might be a little strong, but.
Yeah, it's a little strong. Monday is just like, it's just a piece of it.
Okay. And how's that word present to you? And if I'm not sure, that's fine too.
Yeah, I'm not. It's either auditory, or visual, but I don't remember which.
So what I gather is that this wondering is an analytical or cognitive or whatever processing about speculations about some fact of the world. Is there going to be another class in here afterwards? Or?
Yes.
And then the other wondering, is there a package on my door?
Yes.
Is that with words or pictures or whatever?
This is actually specifically, yeah, there is a picture. It's wondering if a particular product actually got delivered, and there's a picture of the product, which is like a purple bag, and it's experienced as a purple bag of powder.
And that's present to you in your imagination?
Yes.
What do you see?
I see a purple bag. It has a white label in the middle, so there's like this little rounded rectangle, which is like a white area where it would have a label, word written on there, and it's sort of experienced as a white. I experience it as this purple bag of powdered gum, actually.
And so do you see it as a purple bag of powdered gum? So the gumness is part of the seeing?
The gumness is part of the seeing.
So this is a bag of gum?
Yes.
What I see is a bag of gum?
Mhm.
Bag of And is it a purple bag of gum or a bag of purple gum?
It's a purple bag of white gum.
Purple bag.
The whiteness of the gum isn't in my experience, but it's a purple bag of gum.
And that,
Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
I was saying, and with the thing, you said there was like a label?
Yes, there's a little rounded rectangle in the middle.
And do you take it to be that this is what this bag actually looks like?
I do.
So this is a more or less accurate rendition. And I see it in my imagination
Hmm.
clearly. Is there anything to say about that?
I don't see it unclearly, so presumably that means I see it clearly.
And does that mean I see it in color? The bag is purple.
Yes.
And is the purpleness a particularly prominent thing, or is the purple just the way the bag is and I see the bag the way?
The purple,
And the question
there
that
is
I'm-
something about the purpleness, which is like not just a neutral fact. There's something sticking out about the purpleness.
Okay. In a way that the bagness is not sticking out to you.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. And then, is there a wondering that goes beyond this innerly seen thing? Or is the wondering all sort of wrapped up in the innerly seen thing? And now I'm asking the same question as I asked about the word in the other wondering.
Right. There is. The wondering is, the image is sort of all, the wondering is sort of all wrapped up into the picture, because there's also some very vague sense of it being in like a mailbox. I don't really see the mailbox, but there's this sort of vague sense of it being in a mailbox. Or wondering if this image here is in a mailbox. Not this image, but this
Right.
purple bag. Yeah.
So one aspect of my question is there a wondering that's present to you? I wonder if this thing has been delivered or whatever.
Mhm.
No words involved, I understand that, but the wondering is present. And that, maybe one way to ask it, would that wondering still be before the footlights of my consciousness, even if I didn't see the bag? I would still be wondering about the bag.
Yeah, I would still be wondering.
Okay. And then is the mailboxness of this experience, is that sort of in the penumbra of what I see? I see a bag and sort of around it I can tell there's a mailbox there? Or is it that I see the bag and then part of the wondering is, well, maybe this is going to be in a mailbox?
I see the bag, and there is sort of like around in it spatially some sense of a mailbox surrounding it. I don't really visually see it, but there is this sort of spatial sense of mailbox in around.
Okay. And that's part of the bag, part of the inner scene bag, not part of the wondering whether it's here.
It's part of seeing the bag. I feel like it is part of wondering the wondering as well. But I guess I would still be wondering even if that image wasn't there. So I don't know if that answers the question.
So when I was saying it's part of the bag rather than part of the wondering, what I was trying to get at, and the language is a difficult thing here, so we're struggling with each other trying to figure out what we mean,
Mhm.
and that's what we do here for a living. What I was trying to get at was this most, so I gathered that the wondering whether it had arrived is sort of a cognitive analytical thing.
Mhm.
And I gathered that the bag was more a visual, sensory visual seeing kind of a thing. And those were different. One's analytical and one's a visual seeing. And then I wondered whether the mailbox thing seemed like it was more part of the vagueness, more in the seen thing, even though it's not seen, but it's recognize that part of the bag is it, or whether it's part of the analytical process. Well,
Okay.
part of the analytical process would be, well, if it's there, it's gonna be in my mailbox.
Yes. So it's part of the seeing. But I would say, earlier when you asked, would I still be wondering about it, even if the image wasn't there? And I said yes, but I'm realizing now the reason I said yes is because if the image wasn't there, I would find some other way to wonder about it. But I think the image is still the way I'm wondering about it.
So I regretted asking that question when I asked it, because for sort of just exactly that kind of reason.
Okay.
What I really wanted to know when I asked that question was, so this is sort of like a second draft of the question or a third draft or whatever. Does the analytical process seem to stand on its own, or is it entirely wrapped up with the seeing of the?
Okay. It's entirely wrapped up with the seeing.
Okay, so now I need to make sure that I understand what we mean here.
Okay.
So is it fair to say that in this aspect of my experience, I'm seeing a purple bag?
Sorry.
And the significance of that, seeing of the bag, is I'm trying to figure out whether it's likely to be there, whether it's been delivered. And there's no experience of wondering about that. The only experience that I have is of seeing the bag. And when I have to tell these guys about it, then I'm gonna say, well, I was wondering whether it was there, but the only part of my experience at the moment of the beep was seeing the bag. Or am I seeing the bag and at the same time I have this sort of parallelly cognitive analytical process? I'm wondering whether this stuff is there.
Okay. So, in other words, is this an accurate way of saying as well? Is the image of the bag there, and it's there because I was wondering as a fact of the universe, but the wondering isn't in my experience, it's just the image? Is that the first case?
I don't think so.
Okay.
The question is whether the bag is whether the seeing of the bag is a shorthand for the entire experience. I wonder if this is there.
Yeah, I would say it is. It's shorthand for the entire experience.
And so what that would mean, well, in the first part of this process, the part about Monday, I took you to be saying that Monday was not shorthand for the entire experience.
Right.
But the bag is shorthand for the.
Yes.
So that would mean, if I'm understanding us correctly, that the first part of this involves a cognitive analytical process that's sort of directly by itself present before the footlights of my consciousness, along with the word Monday, but this analytical process exists in my experience.
Yes.
Whereas in the third part of this, the purple bag part, there is no separable wondering whether it's arrived.
Yes.
Then I think I'm good about that. Anybody got any questions about that? And I would say as an aside, we've been spending 15 minutes now trying to sort this through, and that's what we have to do in order to become sort of clear about it.
Right.
And
okay.
What we're trying to become clear about is the unsymbolized thinking thing. Does that really exist?
Okay.
And you're saying, well, there seems to, in my lingo, part one of this is there's an unsymbolized thinking, which is about, is there another class here after this one or whatever, and on the purple bag there isn't an unsymbolized thinking. There's just a seeing of a bag with some significance.
Yes. Yeah. That seems accurate to me. The way that I was tempted to explain the seeing of the bag thing, but I wasn't sure if it would make sense, was that there was this image of this bag and sort of in the mailbox or surrounded by the mailbox, and on top of everything it was sort of like a giant invisible question mark. So that was the way I wanted to explain it, but also thought that wasn't entirely accurate because it's not like I thought there was actually an object of a question mark on it.
Right, it's not like you saw a question.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So that would have been a perfectly legitimate way to describe it, and then we would have had to work through what you meant by a question mark, which we would have done.
Okay.
And the moral to that story is, I think we probably would have arrived at the same
Okay.
location,
Sure.
because we were pretty careful about those kinds of things.
Okay.
And I would say, we think that any description that you give is a first draft.
Right.
And the ultimate draft, the final draft, may or may not resemble at all the first draft.
Okay.
So what this process is, as far as we're concerned, is that we ask you what was in your experience at the moment of the beep, and you grunt something, and then we grunt something back and say, well, you know, and we try to figure out it's not actually, we don't actually try to figure out what you mean, we try to figure out what your experience was. And it's a series of dance-like grunts, I suppose, until the grunts seem to be referring to the same thing
Okay.
in ways that satisfy all of us.
Right. Okay.
And what the words were, in terms of a question mark, or I was wondering if, those are two different ways of saying more or less the same thing.
Mhm.
But we don't really care about what those words were, we care about what the experience was.
Okay.
And no matter what you say, we're gonna be trying to satisfy ourselves that we understand what your experience is like,
Okay.
separate from the word.
Okay. Got it.
And then there was another part of this,
The 11.
the number 11. I see 11 on my phone.
Oh, right. So this was a very small part of my experience. It was just a visual experience of the number 11 on my phone, and it was experienced as the time.
So I see the time on my phone, the time is really 11:07 or whatever it is, but I don't see the 07 part.
Right, I don't see the 07 part, I just see the 11.
And I recognize this as 11 o'clock, the 11 o'clock hour.
Right, I don't recognize it as 11:00. I recognize it as this is the 11th hour of the day or whatever.
Something like that.
Like you recognize that it's time, it's not just a number, it's not.
Yes.
Okay.
11 something.
Yeah, there's more
Yes.
to it than just the.
And when you say I just see the 11, do you mean only the 11, or there's other stuff there, but I'm just not paying attention to it?
There is other stuff there, but I'm not paying attention to it. It's sort of blurry. It's not really, I'm not interpreting it or anything like that.
It's not like I've abstracted away my phone, so all I see is an 11,
Mm-hmm.
but what I see is primarily the 11, and the rest of the stuff doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's primarily the 11.
I think I'm good about that.
And real quick, is the phone, like, is the fact that this is on my phone part of my experience, or is that just a fact of the universe?
The fact that it's part of my phone, I believe, was part of my experience.
What does that mean?
That means that, well, I mean, it wasn't,
So let me interrupt the process and talk a little bit about the theory here. So you asked whether the phone was in his experience, and he said yes, basically. Or actually, he hemmed and hawed a little bit, and then he said yes. You have to worry about that. If you ask a question and the guy says yes, it's a problem. And if he's
Yep.
and if he has to hem and haw a little bit and then say yes, it's even more of a problem. But the problem is, he's a nice guy and he wants to please you, and you ask him and he's going to go along with you or whatever. There's a lot of reasons why somebody might say yes. That doesn't really have to do with the
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
So
let me look at my notes again about this one. So,
Does the question make sense?
it does make sense. It does make sense, but I'm trying to determine if what my experience qualified as an experience of my phone. I mean, I didn't experience it as just vaguely a digital display of time.
Mm-hmm.
And there is something like experientially different about this particular 11 being on my phone as opposed to on someone else's phone or on a clock. So that's what I mean by it being on my phone was part of my experience. That said, I wasn't necessarily experiencing it as a telephone,
Right.
or even as necessarily a cell phone, but a particular object that has a set of functions.
So I'm sorry, I distracted there for whatever reason. So could you say that again?
Okay, so when I say that, I do think that to some extent the experience of it being my phone was in my experience. I mean that it wasn't like when I was looking at the time, it wasn't like I was looking at, it was experientially different from looking at like a clock or somebody else's phone or like a digital display on a thermostat or something. There is something experientially different about it being on like my phone. And that doesn't mean I necessarily experience it as a telephone or even an iPhone necessarily, but a particular device that has a set of functions, which I am very familiar with.
So would you say that, okay, I don't know if I'm going too far with this, but, so would you say that this is, okay, I'm trying to think of what I was trying to say, sorry. So would you say that this is, I'm experiencing the 11 that I recognize as a time on my phone? That's not a good question. Like this 11 is different, I guess, than
Then an 11.
than yeah, like seeing it somewhere else. Like that's what I'm trying to. Does that make sense? Like what I'm trying to get at. Like is there
Yes.
something is there something more to say about?
I think there is, but that said, now I'm also wondering, there's also this question that we've discussed before, of, well, maybe it's only in my experience to the extent that, in the same sense that, like, my arm being on this rest was in my
Right.
experience, because otherwise my arm would be, like, falling through the ground or
Right,
whatever.
right.
So I'm actually not sure.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
I was just wondering if there was more to be said about that. Okay.
Okay.
So the question, which I can't remember exactly what you asked, invited that. So Gabriel's a careful answer, which is good.
Mhm.
But your question left open his answer to be yes. So your question was like, well, is there something about the phone there?
Yeah.
That question can always be answered yes. And because there's always something about he's looking at the phone. There is going to be something about the phone there.
Mhm.
So I don't think that's a very productive question, because no matter what happens about it, you're not going to know what you're talking about. I think if you wanted to know about that, you could have asked something like, well, you said when you looked at the 11 at the 07 or whatever, there was something that was sort of something there. Was the phone there in the same way that was something there, or was it more about the number, more about the phone? Maybe you could have gotten something about that. But even more important than that, I would say you want to go for the big picture and not try to get too far into the weeds, because you're just asking for trouble being in the weeds.
Okay.
But learning where the weeds are is part of the hard part about learning about the method.
But,
So it's 1:30, we're an hour in. Do we want to go one more notch here? And
I personally have time for one more notch and I only have one
Yeah,
more,
we
so.
We have till the top of the hour, so, or just a few minutes before.
Yeah, okay, beat 5.
We got
Okay.
15 minutes from my point of view.
Okay, so beat 5. So, somebody had just, for context, texted me asking why I don't just go to the grocery store like normal people. So, in my experience were the words normal people, and that was auditory. I was auditorily experiencing the words normal people in my reading voice. And I was also imagining visually going to the nearby Target.
And is there anything more salient?
Imagining going to the... Actually, no, I would say that they're equal.
Okay. So let's start with normal people. Tell me more.
Okay, so that's experienced as my internal speaking voice that we've talked about before when I'm like internally speaking, but I'm not actually speaking with my physical mouth. And yeah, I think that's all I can really say about that.
Okay. So you had said that this is, you said it's like speaking, and you said reading voice, and then you had also said auditorily.
Right.
So is this like a, I'm producing these words, or is this a, I'm hearing it in a tape recorder, or?
I'm producing these words.
Okay. So, and then your reading voice, is this, what do you mean by my reading voice?
It's just my internal speaking voice, which we've talked about before. So the reason I said reading voice is because anytime I've read something in our past beeps, it's been the same voice. But it's
Okay.
not particularly my reading voice that I'm experiencing it as.
And then tell me again this inner voice that you've,
Okay.
that you are
Right.
saying these words.
So this is sort of I'm experiencing it as my voice, but auditorially it sounds kind of raspy, and it doesn't really have much tone to it or anything like that. It's kind of like a whispery voice.
And is there anything more to say about that?
I don't think so.
Okay. Do you have any-
You did a good job on that.
okay, yeah. And then this Target thing, tell me more.
Right. So there's a Target, for context, nearby the apartment, and it's near like a little plaza thing. So I was sort of I had this I was visually imagining going to that Target, and I had both the image of the plaza and the inside of a grocery store, and it was kind of like the Target was cut in half, so there was no front-facing wall. So you just saw inside of the grocery store, and then on its left is this little plaza where there are a bunch of small shops.
Could you say the part about cut in half again? What did you mean by that?
I just mean like the front wall was off of the building.
Oh.
So it's just like you were seeing inside of it.
Okay. And you're saying, sorry, the front wall's off the building, and then to the left there was something? Or?
Yes, to the left, there was a bunch of small shops and stuff like that, and like this little plaza thing. Also, I'll say I wasn't experiencing, even though this was a Target, I wasn't experiencing I wasn't experiencing it as a Target. I was experiencing it visually as a grocery store, just a general grocery store.
So the Targetness is not.
The Targetness is not present.
Okay. And is there anything about this nearby-ness about it, or is that, again, context?
I would say it isn't nearby. the nearby isn't really there in the sense of location, but it is there in the sense of this is the one I would go to.
Okay. And the, okay.
Is this one imaginary scene? So I see the Target and the shops off to the left?
Yes.
So not two, it's not that I see the grocery store and I see the shop.
Right. It's two. It's one imaginary scene.
Okay. And in detail, so I've got the front of the grocery store. Do I see shelves and,
There are shelves in like sort of the back, but most prominently there is some sort of little column in the middle. Like, you know how in paintings you'll see a column with a fruit bowl on it? It's like a column in the middle, a little column with a basket. And the basket has, I think, grapes in it. And there's a woman picking the grapes out of the basket.
and so is this scene mostly about the grocery store or mostly about the grape?
It's mostly about the grocery store.
Okay.
And there are a few other people scattered around doing stuff as well.
It's a quite specific scene, it sounds like.
Uh,
At least a pedestal and grapes. And
yeah,
persons.
I would say that part of it is specific, but then when it comes to the other people who are scattered around, that's not really specific. They're there, but I don't know where they are. I know there's also a cashier as well, but I can't exactly place where the cashier is.
And does the grapes in the basket have any significance as far as this experience is concerned?
No.
So that's like a sort of a random detail that you have put into this. It's not like you said when normal people, once you do your shopping like normal people, or whatever this thought was about, that doesn't have to do with baskets or grapes or.
No. I think maybe another way of putting this is it wasn't necessarily thematic, the grapes or the person picking it. This is just part of the image.
Okay. And I think that'd be.
Okay. Well, then that covers that beat then.
Okay. So shall we do this again?